Have you ever walked away from a meeting or a family dinner feeling like you just became the punchline of someone else's joke? No one yelled at you. There was no argument. But the subtle comments, the looks, the little just kidding jabs, they made you ask yourself, what did I do wrong? You kept your cool. You smiled politely, swallowed the comeback rising in your throat. And when it was all over, you sat alone overthinking, justifying, wondering, was I being too sensitive? Or were they pushing boundaries on purpose? The answer might surprise you. It's not because you're weak. It's because they're testing to see if you'll stand your ground. In this video, I'm going to show you 6 real reasons why people try to humiliate you. And more importantly, how Stoicism helps you hold on to your calm, your dignity, and your personal power. Even when the whole room seems to turn against you, you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to please anyone to be respected. You just need to understand one truth. People will test you, but you are the one who sets the limits. Let's begin. Reason 1, they sense weakness. Sometimes people don't insult you because they hate you. They do it to test you. Like predators in the wild, they don't attack right away. They observe, they look for weakness. And only then do they strike. The unsettling truth is, some people operate the same way. Picture this. You're in a meeting. You offer a suggestion calmly without imposing. But before you can even finish, someone cuts in, half joking. Okay, no need for a philosophy lecture. Everyone laughs. You laugh too, even though it stings a little. It's fine, you tell yourself. They're just kidding. But then it happens again the next week. And again after that. Little by little, you start to speak less. You become more cautious. Slowly, without realizing it, you begin to shrink. In that moment, you don't think you're being weak. You think you're being polite, keeping the peace, taking the high road. But in the eyes of others, especially those looking for a chance to interrupt, your silence isn't kindness. It's permission. And once they see you don't push back, they take it as an open invitation. Because in this power game, there is no neutral ground. Either you hold your position or you get pushed back. The typical response is to endure. Sometimes you fake a smile, or worse, try to win them over by being even softer. But the more you retreat, the more they advance. Because you just taught them that there are no consequences. And this is how you begin to lose your self-respect. Not loudly, but quietly, slowly, without noticing. Stoicism teaches another way. Not anger, not aggression, but inner control. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." That means you can't stop people from testing you, but you can choose how you respond. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to look someone in the eye and say clearly, "I don't think that's appropriate." No attitude, no over-explaining. Just calm, clear, and firm. I've lived this. Early in my career, I worked at a small agency. One colleague constantly made jokes at my expense. Anytime I shared an idea, he'd jump in, mock it, or belittle it in front of the team. I stayed silent for a long time. I didn't want to disrupt the atmosphere. But the more I stayed quiet, the further he pushed. Until one day in the middle of a meeting, after another sarcastic jab, I looked him straight in the eye and said, "You've done that a few times now. I don't find it funny." De no anger, no raised voice. Just one sentence, steady and simple. The room went silent. He froze. And from that day on, he never did it again. I didn't win in that moment. I simply reclaimed my place. What I learned is this. People will keep pushing until you stop retreating. You don't have to yell. You don't have to play the victim. You just have to stop giving ground. Calmness is not silence. Calmness is knowing when to speak and saying what needs to be said in the right way at the right time. No one will respect you unless you give them a reason to. And that reason isn't in clever words or flashy speeches. It's in the consistency and strength you project when you refuse to be someone else's test of dominance. Reason 2, they want control. Not everyone who insults you hates you. Some people try to humiliate you not out of hatred, but because they want to control you. And this isn't always easy to spot because it rarely shows up as open threats. It comes through subtle, pointed remarks, sharp glances when your back is turned, jokes that aren't jokes. And more often than not, it comes from people who feel deeply powerless on the inside. Chances are, you've met someone like this before. They can't stand it when you're calm, when you're okay, when you don't need them. It makes them feel out of control. And to regain that sense of power, they try to make you shrink. They say things that make you second-guess yourself. They twist the story just enough to force you to explain, to apologize, or to back down in the name of keeping the peace. Sorry, but truth isn't what they're after. What they want is to see you lose your center. The most common response: we try to please. We speak less. We play it more professional. We try to be extra nice, thinking, if I'm kind enough, maybe they'll respect me. But that's not how this works. Because they're not looking for cooperation, they're looking for power. And if you keep stepping back, they'll keep stepping forward. The more you give, the more they take, until there's no room left for you to be yourself. So how do you break that cycle? Stoicism offers a clear answer. You can't control other people, but you can refuse to cooperate with their contempt. Epictetus once said, if someone provokes you, realize that it is your own opinion that provokes you. People can say whatever they want, but their words are just noise until you decide they mean something. Instead of reacting or arguing, just don't give them power. You don't need to clap back. You don't need to sound clever. You just stay calm, stay grounded, and don't get pulled into their storm. When someone tries to belittle you, look them in the eye and say, I don't agree with that. Or say nothing at all. Hold your silence with intention. That stillness, that unshaken presence, that's what truly throws them off. I remember working at a media company where a manager would constantly correct me in front of others. Every meeting, he'd fix something I said, even if it was a minor detail, always with that smug little smile. At first, I responded by working harder. I sent clearer emails, chose my words carefully. But it kept happening. Until one day during a meeting, he interrupted me again with one of his usual minor corrections. I paused, looked straight at him, and said, if you have feedback, we can talk privately after the meeting. I wasn't angry. I wasn't rude. I was just direct. The room went silent. He shrugged, changed the subject. And from that day on, he never did it again. The lesson I learned? You don't need to raise your voice to protect yourself. You just need to stop letting people define you with their words. Real power comes from no longer needing their approval. And when you stop playing by their rules, suddenly, they have no game left to play. Reason 3, they envy you. There are times when people don't mock you because you're weaker than them. They mock you because you make them feel inadequate. It sounds backwards, but if you've ever been teased for being disciplined, for working hard, or for sticking to your principles, then you've already experienced this. You don't need to show off or lecture anyone. Just by living according to your values, someone in the room will feel threatened. And instead of questioning themselves, they turn their attention to you. They laugh at you for going to bed early, for turning down a drink, for refusing to take part in something toxic. They call you too serious or say you're too rigid. But deep down, they don't actually hate you. They hate the guilt that you unknowingly awaken in them. There's a psychological concept called malicious envy. It doesn't motivate people to improve. It simply makes them want to pull others down to their level. And this is where most people stumble. We begin to doubt ourselves. Am I being arrogant? Am I too inflexible? Did I do something wrong? Slowly, we start adjusting ourselves to be more likable, more agreeable, easier to be around. But in doing so, we lose the most important thing we have, our internal consistency. Stoicism teaches a different path. It doesn't encourage you to chase acceptance. It reminds you that other people's reactions are not your responsibility. Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." Our people who envy you aren't reacting to what you have. They're reacting to how you live. You become a mirror to their own compromises, and they can't stand that reflection. So the answer isn't to shrink yourself or dim your light. The answer is to keep living in alignment with your values, calmly, without defensiveness, without needing to prove anything. The more grounded you are, the less they can touch you, because you're not playing by their rules. And when you stop carrying the shame they try to hand you, you step outside of the game they're playing. I remember once at a dinner party with old friends, everyone was laughing and enjoying themselves. Someone poured me another glass of wine. I smiled, thanked them, and politely declined. One of the guys looked at me and said, half joking, "What's this? You joined a monastery or something?" The whole table laughed. In the past, I might have laughed along just to keep the peace. But that night I simply replied, "No. I just like to keep a clear head." I didn't say it with arrogance or defiance. I just stated the truth. The table went quiet for a moment. Then the conversation moved on. No one brought it up again. And from that point on, nobody questioned my choices anymore. That one simple sentence wasn't said to start a fight. It was said to draw a boundary. That experience reminded me, you don't need to argue to protect yourself. You just need to be clear enough not to be shaken. And if someone feels uncomfortable because you're living in alignment with your values, that's their issue, not yours. Reason 4, you haven't set boundaries. Sometimes the reason people treat you poorly isn't because they're cruel. It's because you've let them. Not intentionally, not because you enjoy it, but because you didn't draw the line. And when there's no line, people assume they can walk wherever they want. Think about it. You say yes when you're tired. Laugh when something bothers you. Let a comment slide because it's not worth the drama. At first it feels harmless. You tell yourself you're being patient, flexible, easygoing. But slowly it builds. What started as a one-time favor becomes an expectation. What was once a harmless joke becomes a routine jab. And before you realize it, you've trained people to believe they can treat you however they want. The typical reaction? We bottle it up. We swallow our discomfort. We wait for people to just get it. But people rarely do. Instead, they keep pushing because we haven't shown them where the boundary is. And eventually, we either explode from pent-up frustration or quietly pull away, burned out and bitter. Neither of those options feels good. So what's the alternative? What if you didn't have to wait until you were angry to protect your peace? What if you could draw your line early, with calm, with clarity, and without apology? That's exactly what Stoicism offers. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." At first glance, that sounds harsh. But what he meant was this: if you're going to grow, if you're going to change your patterns, you have to be okay with people not understanding you right away. You have to be okay with people judging your boundaries, questioning your silence, or misreading your intent. That's the price of inner peace. Setting boundaries won't always make you popular, but it will make you free. And the sooner you stop needing people to like your limits, the sooner they'll start respecting them. Here's the truth. People don't have to agree with your boundaries. They just need to know they exist. You don't need a long explanation. You don't need to justify every no. What you need is consistency. Calm, kind, but firm. A few years ago, I was in a group of friends who love sarcasm. Every hangout was a roast session. At first it was fun. Then slowly the comments got personal. They'd make fun of my career, my habits, even my voice. I kept laughing along, not wanting to be that guy. Until one night, something in me snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. The next time it happened, I looked at the guy across from me and said, "You know, I'm not okay with that." Siri ton was. He laughed. I didn't get angry. I didn't insult him back. I just stopped playing along. And over time, they stopped too. The jokes shifted. The energy changed. And even though not everyone understood, I started feeling like myself again. What I learned from that season is this: boundaries don't push people away. They filter who gets close. And sometimes the people who fall off after you set them were never really on your side to begin with. So if you've been feeling disrespected, overlooked, or walked on, it might not be about what they're doing. It might be about what you're not saying. You don't need to get louder to restart anymore. You just need to get clearer. Reason 5. They seek an audience. Sometimes when people insult you, it's not because they hate you or even because they truly think less of you. Sometimes they do it simply because someone is watching. They need a stage, and you unintentionally become the prop. Think back to the last time you were mocked. Not in a private conversation, but in front of others. In a meeting, at a family dinner, during a social gathering, those sarcastic comments and jokes always seem to land when there's an audience, and you feel trapped. If you respond, you risk being labeled sensitive. If you stay silent, you feel humiliated. It's a trap. And the worst part is, it's not random. Psychology calls this de-individuation, a phenomenon where individuals in a group lose their sense of personal identity and become more extreme, more irresponsible. In a crowd, they feel protected. They say things they wouldn't dare say one-on-one. And the person trying to humiliate you isn't trying to resolve anything. They're performing. The more people laugh, the more valuable they feel. But what they sacrifice is the respect owed to the person they're stepping on. You. Most of us respond with silence, a forced laugh. We grit our teeth and tell ourselves to just get through it. Then we go home and stew over it, wishing we had said something, anything to reclaim our dignity. But the more we tolerate, the bolder they become. And the more we shrink in our own eyes. Stoicism teaches a simple truth. You don't need the crowd to understand you in order to be yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is worthless if none of them know the truth." You don't need the room to stand with you. You just need one person not to abandon you, yourself. So what do you do when someone tries to shame you publicly? Not retaliate, not preach, just remain calm. Look them in the eye, no smiling, no shrinking, and say clearly, "I don't find that funny." Or, "I hope we can speak to each other with a bit more respect." And that's all. No anger, no retreat, just clarity, then silence. Sermonon. One hinanorish. Because silence has a power of its own. It forces others to face what just happened, without laughter to mask it, without noise to hide in. I once had a colleague like this. Every time I spoke in meetings, he'd make a face or throw in a joke that got the room laughing. At first I thought, let it go, as long as the work gets done. But each time it happened, I felt myself getting smaller. Until one day, after another joke at my expense, I looked him in the eye and said, "I'd appreciate it if you let me finish before making jokes next time." No shouting, no insult, just clarity. The room fell silent. He shrugged and said nothing. And strangely, after that day, he never did it again. Not because I won, but because I stopped playing his game. The lesson isn't fight back to win. It's to maintain control in the moment someone tries to take it from you. You don't need applause to know your worth. You just need one thing: inner steadiness. And sometimes a well-timed, well-spoken sentence is enough to quiet an entire room. Not because you're the smartest person there, but because you're the one who does not waver. Reason 6, you don't know your own worth. Sometimes the reason people easily insult you, cross your boundaries, or disrespect you doesn't come from them. It comes from you. Not because you're weak, but because you haven't fully recognized your own worth. When you don't know who you are, you live in reaction. A compliment lifts you too high. A criticism brings you crashing down. A condescending look can ruin your entire day, while one word of approval makes you feel like you finally have permission to exist. And just like that, your value isn't in your hands anymore. It's in theirs. That's a dangerous place to be, because people who lack a sense of self-worth often attract the exact type of person who will exploit it. Manipulators. People who need someone beneath them to feel tall, and if you have no roots within yourself, you become fertile ground for their doubt, their insults, and their control to take hold. The usual response: try to become worthy. Work harder, shrink more. Make yourself small so no one accuses you of being arrogant. But all of that only leads you further away from yourself. The problem isn't that you're not good enough. The problem is you don't believe that you already have value. You just haven't stopped to see it, to own it. Stoicism offers a powerful shift. No one can hurt you if you are in command of yourself. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom doesn't come from money or titles. It comes from knowing who you are, where you stand, and refusing to let anyone else define that for you. This practice begins by watching yourself. Notice the moments when you shrink under judgment. Pay attention to how intensely you react to criticism. And instead of rushing to fix yourself just to be accepted, pause and ask, do I believe this? If the answer is no, don't let it stick to you for another second. I think of Eleanor Roosevelt, one of the calmest, steadiest forces in modern history. She was mocked for her looks, her voice, for not fitting the mold of a proper lady in high society. But she didn't try to fit. She didn't contort herself for public approval. She stood, wrote, spoke, acted, and became a symbol of dignity. Not because she was perfect, but because she knew who she was, and no one could take that from her. We don't have to be Eleanor Roosevelt to learn this. We just have to begin in one place, by refusing to live off someone else's permission. When you know your worth, you don't need to react to every insult. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. And here's the strange thing. When you truly believe in your value, the people who used to hurt you suddenly lose their power. Not because they've changed, but because you have. You're no longer easily wounded. Not because you've hardened your heart, but because you've built a foundation within, steady, solid, unshakable. That is what real invincibility looks like. Not a cold shell, but deep self-awareness. And when you live from that place, you don't need anyone to respect you in order to feel worthy. You carry that respect with you everywhere you go. You see, people will test you. They'll joke, mock, and try to tear you down. Not because you're wrong, but because you make them uncomfortable. Well, they'll push your limits, probe for weakness. But what they don't expect is this. You don't fold. You don't react the way they're used to. You've stopped playing their game. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You don't need agreement to know you're right. You don't need a crowd to feel worthy. You just need one thing: to stand like stone in the storm. Stoicism doesn't make you cold. It makes you steady, unaffected by praise, unshaken by criticism. It doesn't ask you to toughen up. It teaches you to let go where it matters. Let go of expectations, of control, of the need to be understood by everyone. And when you walk through the world with that kind of calm, you realize dignity isn't something you demand. It's something you embody every single day. Steady your mind, speak less, do right, move slow but never backwards. You don't have to prove anything because you are already enough. If this spoke to you, leave a comment. I read everyone. And if you ever need to hear this again, you know where to find it.